There's a feeling of hopelessness about it. You know, I moved here for a feeling of a bit more security and, you know, to find a studio that I could really call home for the long term, and I was under the impression that we still had time.
Everyone's feeling the squeeze in London, but for artists it's never been harder. In Dalston, dozens of painters, sculptors and designers are being evicted from the V22 studio on Ashwin Street.
The group of artists had been told to leave this studio by the end of the month, with Hackney Council deeming the building unsafe to work in, and it's left the creative community in Dalston feeling unsupported.
We are actually celebrating our 20th year in the building. V22 has around 700 buildings across London, but this is the oldest one we have, and the original building, that's where the company started from.
So how many artists are based here?
So we have 31 studios and 39 artists which are based, because some of them obviously share the space with other artists. Just to be clear, from our perspective, we have been operating in accordance to all the rules and regulations, and we have all the health and safety certificates, etc. in place. So, and you can see, you know, there's fire extinguisher, there's fire doors, there's all that is required effectively if you go through this checklist.
I'm actually a theatre maker and performance maker, so I've always had a real sense that making is important. I think Hackney Council, hopefully, they will be sympathetic. We're not saying it's easy, but we don't think the studios are a death trap. If they were, we probably wouldn't still be in here.
Yeah, I mean, so at the moment in the studio, I've got these works that are for an upcoming group show at Standpoint Gallery, which is just down in Hoxton, which the show's opening right after the eviction date that we've been set. I think it opens like 2 days later. So it's sort of juggling the fight with the studio to try and keep it, whilst also trying to, you know, push the work forward and keep on track with my deadline. There's a feeling of hopelessness about it. I mean, it's a story that you'll probably hear from a lot of artists, and myself and a couple of the other tenants here had faced something similar, not from the council, but a studio in the City of London that we were a part of got closed with 2 months' notice after we'd been in there for just over a year. That was a meantime space, so, you know, some of these studios aren't long-term, but the ones that are, like this one, which has been here 20 years, you know, I moved here for a feeling of a bit more security and, you know, to find a studio that I could really call home for the long term, and I was under the impression that we still had time. So, you know, you sort of feel hopeless and frustrated when you initially hear it, and then it's sort of trying to fight it or find something that can work, but there's just not a lot out there.
One of the kind of positive outcomes of the news from Hackney via V22 is that we've been campaigning and discussing and strategising together, so we know each other much, much more, and that's always uplifting. And some of the stories about studio space and being moved from studio space not once but 3-4 times. So if your livelihood is dependent on your studio space, that is an upheaval. And it's a violation, because you don't want to be thrown about as if you're not valuable. And this is something that we really think that the council would want to address.
I think that, you know, for this building to have been here for so long, and there's a real strong community in here. I mean, I've only been here for a year, but even then, I think with this, we've all banded together stronger, but there's a real, you know, you've got people in here that have been here 6, 7, 8, 15 years. So it's not just a case of fighting for a studio, it's fighting to stay within the community that the artists have called home for 20 years now.
The eviction raises larger questions about the regeneration and gentrification of Dalston. The building backs onto a much-loved community garden, and there are fears that the council's plans to redevelop the building will inevitably extend into this green space. Hackney Council has told City London News the building must be vacated as its condition presents significant health and safety risks for occupants. We've offered to temporarily rehouse some of V22's tenants in a nearby building in Dalston Lane.
Yeah, I feel like...
And it's not just in Dalston that artists are struggling, it's a London-wide problem. On the other side of the capital, in Wimbledon Art Studios, artist Willoughby Brow has similar fears for the future of his studio.
I grew up in a 2-bedroom flat, and I was always making artwork, and there was no room in the house at all. It was like a broom closet when I first got it, but I moved to here a few years ago after selling some work, and now I'm in here and desperately trying to maintain the rent. I've seen it happen a lot of people come in here. You find a place that eventually you find a place where you can work and you can just about afford it and you can just about scrape through and you can just about maintain it. And then the price goes up and the demand for art stays the same. If anything, it's gotten worse. We had a time here where we were changing. The building here is leased to a charity, but the building owner changed hands. And that was a very, very scary time, and we didn't know if we were literally all going to be evicted, like, you know, in a couple of weeks or something. Artists are used to lack of security, obviously, in the freelance world, you're used to that. But, you know, it'd be nice to have a break from that in terms of tenancy.